Well, so development cannot be like minimized or assumed to be merely a matter of age. And it's supposed to be also a succession of stages that turn us into whatever we end up being. And basically what stays with us.
Yeah, I
So
think
since you're
yeah, I think this episode is something very stereotypical about psychology, which is this question of tell me about your childhood. I thought it could be interesting to talk a little bit about why some psychologists will ask that and whether or not it makes sense to ask that in 2025. And whether or not that is something that even matters to you as a 40, 50, 60 year old or however old you are. Or maybe you are a 20-year-old adult, and does it matter? So that's kind of the topic for today. Um, let's see. Let's see how we can make cautious, then cautious.
well, and
Oh, sorry, and let's
try
control
to
the trouble.
confront your troubles, right?
Yes, as well. Hi, this is Josh.
And this is Santi. Welcome to the session in the Mind Quest.
So, like I said a little bit earlier, I think there is a lot of discussion about whether it's in therapy, whether it's in family dynamics, whether it's in education work, of how much does your childhood one influence, how much does it influence who you are today, and how much does it matter to begin with? And I think this is a question that psychology has sort of contemplated or included inside its studies from the beginning. So I figured we could do a little bit of sort of history, look at how it started, and look at where we are today in terms of how we understand the relationship between how we grow up to where we are today as human beings that can watch a podcast on a Wednesday morning.
Okay, so as we have done so far, right? The initial idea will be to like organize the field and set up the boundaries of the I don't know the concepts of this area, right? Because it can be confused between other elements that are also related to childhood and working out stuff that happens inside our minds and somehow stay with us. So we're keeping inside the development area, and that will be like how we're gonna build the framework for. And for that purpose, our good friend, Mr. Erickson, not Leaf, but Eric, will give us some ideas about its duration, the importance of the context and biology, and conflict resolution, and how we form this identity we end up having.
Yeah. So, like I said, so there has definitely been an interest in this from the beginning. One of the first things that Freud decides to study, and the whole reason why he ends up discovering, inventing, whatever you believe about psychoanalysis, is precisely because he's looking at children and he's trying to understand how do we go from being the baby that cannot speak to the adult that can now look at the baby. Freud's ideas, topic for a different episode. For today, I wanted to focus on Erickson, who is actually one of Freud's disciples. Erickson will look at what Freud has to say about childhood psychosexual development, and Erickson will extend it to the whole life. He will say we can use this paradigm of different sort of steps that a child takes to look at the different steps that a human takes throughout their whole life. So maybe we can sort of organize a person's life or a person's learning, I would say, inside the different stages.
Okay, so I think we will also see like these stages or steps or however it actually works are not necessarily like a linear stuff. They are organized in a linear way, but not always like working that way. Maybe you jump a step any kind of reason. And I mean, I'm imagining that that generates an unresolved stuff in your mind, so you need to go back and solve it. Maybe it's just my ideas on this kind of stuff, but and I mean, they are there's a role of social modulation around it, and sometimes it kind of would interfere with some psychopathologies that you could have. And I read somewhere uh, that at times depression can be understood as a reflection of stagnation or regression in the resolution of a developmental stage. More or less, like if you're depressed, you're like going backwards in your
Mm,
development
mm,
process.
mm, mm,
So, well, I don't really understand how this could happen, but maybe it's like uh, backtracking yourself.
mm, mm. I think that's a really good observation. And you are noticing something in terms of the time, in terms of sort of what psychology was at the time, where these theories were being formulated. So nowadays, in 2025, you may have heard even myself say things like, we have a strengths-based approach, or we have a client-centric process, where we put this person at the center of their own healing process. When Erickson was sort of organizing his theory, they still had a deficiency-based approach. So everything is operating from the notion that there is some sort of archetypical perfect human being, and what we're looking at is the things that are failing, that are preventing us from being that archetypical perfect human being. A lot of problems with this with this way of viewing the world. Um, I think the most iconic one would be that obviously for Erickson, a Western white, probably affluent man, the perfect human is coincidentally a Western individual white high class man, probably. I don't know if he would say that, but some of the critiques, for example, that happen around the way he organizes his theory is precisely that, like Freud, it is a man's way of learning and developing. It kind of sidesteps any female consideration. Maybe they are different in any way. So, important to consider the context where this is happening. So, because of that, yes, Erickson is going to discuss a lot about the things that can go wrong during our development, during or these different stages that he sort of organizes. Um, and obviously, because of that, they also get connected to, okay, so if we're talking about an adult who's depressed, like you were saying, maybe we can understand that depression from the lens of these stages and what went wrong in them. But again, notice how everything I just said is about what's wrong with you. That was kind of the problem. That to define what's wrong with you, I have to have an ideal. And it is very likely that ideal will refer to my biases of what's good and sort of the ideal human being. So that's kind of the
Yeah,
problem. Okay? So that's
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of sort of how this works. So what we're going to look at today, very interesting, very useful, but let's keep in mind the context where this is being formulated and where this is being presented.
Yeah, none of this is mandatory. I mean, it helps, but it's not a rule. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think in the end we will see that this situation also has its, as you say, limitations, right? Uh, Also, it has traits, obviously, but uh, understanding this limited view because we're all limited, and Erickson is not a godlike figure. He figured out some stuff, but as time changes, we all change. So uh, maybe this will, I mean, like open the way to other levels of understanding somehow inside your own soul, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the strengths that I think sort of I would say psychoanalysts have, and Eric Fromm is a psychoanalyst as well. like their concepts act as entry points to understanding other concepts. And I think that's what's interesting about them. Because like I said, I have said before, like these guys are making up stuff. Like they cannot observe like the mind. Nobody can. So what they are doing is building a narrative that helps understand and through understanding to manipulate in a good way, in a bad way, to manipulate sort of the process of a non-speaking infant becoming an adult. So important to keep that in mind as well, right? Like I think this applies to all of psychology, and it's precisely one of the big sort of challenges that psychology has. That it is difficult to describe precisely something that you cannot understand. Um, if we ask 3 psychologists what the mind is, we will have 4 answers. So it's okay. Something important to keep in mind there as well. And maybe with that little introduction, we can sort of move on to today's topic or whatever comes to our head, and start going deeper into this.
Yeah, so I think the most important part here is starting with the basics.
Mhm.
Because as I see the term lifelong used a lot in here, like there's a lot of lifelong situations related to this development theory.
Mhm.
Uh, and I'm surely would love or like to believe that development ended at the adolescence stage of your life, and from then on, you decide who you are based on whatever had happened, and
Mhm.
you keep going, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, what's actually happening to us? Because according to this guy, we're always changing,
Mhm.
and we've talked of this so far in many many episodes that we're always in a changing situation. Like we're not static people.
Mhm.
It's kind of difficult to keep on being static and not moving around because time and biology and whatever happens around is changing you and context is changing. So change is mandatory. Maybe it's the only mandatory thing around here.
Mhm.
And you know, even when we have the perception that nothing is actually changing, there's something changing. I mean, it could be ridiculous, like seeing yourself at night in the mirror and the next morning finding out you have another white hair on your beard, or
Mhm.
I don't know, a new wrinkle on your forehead, or whatever. Could be small things. Maybe your favorite shirt now has a hole because termites, or I don't know, flies,
Mhm.
whatever is coming around the house, and change is there. It's not the same sunny day, it's a different sunny day. Maybe you got more clouds today, maybe you got less clouds. Maybe it's cloudy, but it's terribly hot. Maybe it's an open blue, I don't know, white sky or an open blue sky, and all of a sudden everything is cold as, I don't know, your freezer, worse
Mhm.
than your freezer. So
Mhm.
change is there. What's going on with this
Mhm.
situation of staying in development all the time due to change always being there?
Mhm. Mhm. That's a really good question. And yeah, you are absolutely correct. Like in many contexts, like we also use age, for example, to decide you can drive, or if you can sign up for the military, or if you can enter a strip club. So in your everyday parlance, we definitely have this idea that by the time you reach 18, 20, 21, whatever, like sort of you are done. There isn't a further step that you are going to take. I mean, maybe when you retire, you become a retiree, I guess. But generally speaking, you go from being a child, a teenager, to an adult, and kind of that's it. That kind of or praxis of how we go around life. Freud was a doctor. He was a neurologist, and that's in many ways where he sort of confines himself to childhood. Because he's kind of operating on this same principle. He sort of understands that by the time we reach 18, 19, 20, our physical biology disposition is sort of set. We talked about this when we talked about like language, I think it was. How for the circuits, the physical organization of your brain for certain abilities like decision making, abstract thinking, is done by around, I mean, I think we said 25 really in terms of the brain. And in many ways that is true. It is true that at around 25, your body and your brain have reached sort of a stable configuration that they for the remaining for the rest of your life. The thing is that you are not your brain or your body. Like, your decision to follow the law doesn't have a biological substrate. Your ability to hold a meaningful conversation with your partner or with your parents does not have a biological mechanism that you develop automatically. All of these things are things that you learn. All of these things are things that are built on the biological basis of your brain. For these are things that you construct. There isn't a mechanism that I don't know. We already should follow the law. Love somebody. We were talking about motivation a few episodes ago. There isn't like a mechanism that for you turn it on and now you have motivation for the next 50 years. Those are not biological things. They definitely have a physical substrate, but they do not. They are not part of evolution. We didn't evolve to be good at our job. We evolved to eat when we feel hungry. That's as far as your brain goes. So these two ideas are kind of true at the same time. On one hand, yes, sort of your body finishes, quote unquote, its development at around 25, but your mind does not. I would say that your mind does not. Your mind doesn't have an endpoint. There isn't a point where we say, "Oh, your mind is complete." So we also don't have a point where we say, "Oh, you don't need to change your mind anymore." We don't think of our minds like that. We understand it is a continuous process of experience that will be there, independently of what happens to my body. It will be there, and that is what continues to change. That is what continues sort of building up upon itself. So if the first layer is the biology of your brain, all the other layers are you, the speaker, building your mind and the different layers of your mind and how it operates. And this only makes sense in the context of a society. If you do not live in a society, all the things you learn don't make sense. If you don't live in a society, you don't need to follow the laws because there are no laws. You don't live in a civilized place where you need to respect others. So this is why it's directly connected to the social element of it. Because the purpose of language in many ways is to let us live in a society instead of just eating each other and leading ourselves to extinction. So that's the idea. So both are true. Yes, your body is kind of done at 25, but what continues to develop is your mind, which is in a way just the neurons are organized rather than the structural difference of your brain. I don't know if this sort of answered the question.
Yeah, sort of, and also goes ahead of some stuff that I was thinking on asking you also, like, what does actually culture and biology have to do with this? So more or less they are inside.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is maybe a better question would be here that is there a relation between culture and biology inside our heads?
Mm-hmm. Hmm. So the thing is, I don't know if I have mentioned this idea before, but except in some very specific domains, we generally don't talk about things as they are like in reality. We talk about the concept that we have in our head. So if I say, again, when I was saying earlier that at 25 we are done with development. When I say that, what I have in my head is different from what's appearing in your head when you hear that concept. Independent of what reality is. So our minds have an interpretation of our biology. So when I feel pain, that pain is my mind's interpretation of a biological signal, of my neurons simply firing because they notice I'm inflicting pressure on them or too much pressure or whatever. But in many ways, if I ask you what you're feeling, the only thing you can tell me about is about your concept of pain. You can use words to describe that, but you cannot communicate that to me. You can only use words to communicate with me. So that's kind of the key element to understand here. That while it is true that biology is the substrate, it's at the bottom of everything, the world we live in is not that world of biology. It's the world of words. And those words have included that biology doing in one way or another. There are things I believe about my biology that I don't know if they are necessarily true. And we were talking about vaccines at some point. I think vaccines work. I really do not know if that is 100% actually the case. If you ask me to prove it to you, I don't know if I could. And this is kind of the idea. Like, we don't go through our lives in absolute certainty. There are things that we just choose to believe in, and that's as far as we go. And that applies to our biology as well. So that is the connection. The connection is that in many ways, our biology is sort of subsumed by your language or by your social environment. What I believe about my biology is actually conditioned by that. If I grow up in a family that thinks that all vaccines are bullshit, odds are I will agree and believe that all vaccines are bullshit. The reality doesn't matter because that is real for me because of the context where I grew up. That's kind of the idea.
Okay, okay. It was a little bit maybe on the idea of this like weird cases of feral kids, for example, that they're like build up more like wild animals than common human beings or nowadays common human beings. But
Mhm.
well, I mean these are exceptions at the end and not like the most common cases. So let's get to another thing that I think should be a concept inside these kind of ideas, and it is oh where was I? What are these unsolved conflicts,
Okay.
and why does that sound like a ghost story?
What do you mean with ghost story?
Yeah, you know, every time you listen to a ghost story, ghost is out there because it has an unsolved thing to
Mm.
repair in the land of the living, so he can ascend to heaven or end up going to hell or whatever, right? That's more or less every ghost story. So ghosts exist because they have unsolved issues on Earth. So, and I'm asking you this because maybe this idea of ghosts following you is got something to do with this idea of you got unsolved stuff, unsolved issues, maybe from your past that you need to um, solve, well, recover, fix, whatever.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So this kind of leads us into talking about like Erickson and like his theory, right? And his idea of how we become like socially adults or what happens throughout our life. What he proposes is that at certain points in our life, we have these crises. But he doesn't mean these crises in the sense of a plane crash or I just got divorced. He means crisis in sort of I think it's the Latin root, which simply means like a point of inflection, like a crossroads, like a turning point. So that's what he means when he says like this psychosocial crisis. So in a way, he says, for us to function as members of Western individualistic 1930s, I think this is, society, there are certain virtues, and that's what he calls them, that we need to have. And these are like skills that we get to use, left than like virtues from like the cyber categories. No. It's more like skills or specific abilities that we need to have to be able to function in society. And every one of these crises that he describes are an opportunity to acquire that virtue. Up until here, any questions?
No, I'm trying to connect it with, I don't know, role playing games. So
Yes.
yeah, I'm getting the perks for these virtues. So okay, where I'm putting them, what I'm choosing, maybe that's related to the context. So if I'm, where am I? Right, I'm Ecuadorian, and I'm gonna choose to have these virtues. I'm gonna be talkative and try to be outgoing and whatever. Like my people is bad. I'm gonna try to be formal in my expressions instead
Mhm.
of speaking half words. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm in the right thinking way. I'm connecting with this idea that they are perks somehow
Yes.
for
Yes.
your
Yes.
identity, your character, whatever it's gonna be.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of thinking of them. Like they are things that you unlock them, and now you keep them forever, and you can use them wherever you want. Definitely. And I would say in many ways the crisis is sort of the prerequisite that you need to fulfill before you can unlock that perk, before you can unlock that particular ability. I think this is a really good way to think about it. So the way, or let's say that prerequisite that you need to succeed to be able to get the perk, that would be the crisis that he mentioned. And this crisis is essentially a crossroads, an act of balance between two opposing poles. Um, it's not that one is good and one is bad, or that one they don't have that characteristic of morality. One is sort of the basic state of ignorance of all humans when they are born, and the other pole is sort of what you can develop from there. So, to give you an example, first stage is trust versus mistrust. So, if you imagine a baby that has just been born, that has no control, no autonomy over themselves, their task in the first stage of their life is to sort of figure out whether other people can be trusted or not. Whether I can rely on, whether I can expect my needs will be met by somebody else or not. How easily are my needs going to be met by somebody else or not? So the crisis is that. Is do I trust my caregiver to keep me fed, clothed, warm, and all of that? Or do I not? Do they not keep me fed, warm, and all of that? And you may imagine as a baby, you don't have a lot of control over this. So most of us start with a coin flip, whether or not the first stage of your life will actually be, you know, will have or rather, will give you the opportunity to develop trust instead of mistrust. The idea will be that mistrust is the base state. Essentially, you're born not trusting anything because you don't know anything. And if things go well, if you are well taken care of, and you manage to feel that you can trust other human beings, you complete the stage and you get the perk. In this case, the perk is hope, the basic virtue of hope. That means the ability to think that one, things can get better, and that two, other people are trustworthy, and that other humans are sort of, or rather, just opens the possibility to trust other humans. And if you pay attention, you may start noticing how this connects to an adult who has trust issues. And this is the first stage, right? And this is kind of the idea of how things from the past stay to the present. So if I never solve this, if my first very early years were very neglectful, and I never developed that fundamental virtue of being able to have hope that other people are trustworthy and that I can change the world, then as an adult, that will be expressed in me being unable to trust other people. Why? I don't know. I just don't feel like I can trust other people. Yes, of course you don't. Because you don't have the perk that lets you trust other people. That's kind of the idea
Of course.
here. And I'm going to be asking the
Okay.
question of,
Yeah, yeah. We're getting a little ahead. I mean, but let's get into that since you already started with this idea. So, Eric, son of Eric,
mhm,
proposed these 8 stages, right, of
yeah.
development, and even though approximately age ranges are assigned to them, it
Mm,
does seems that there are things that I myself feel have been lost along the way.
mm,
Like
mhm,
I read along of them and tried to get them more or less an idea of what was supposed to be happening to me at those ages, even though I mean, for most of the first stages that are related to childhood, I have no idea what those
mhm,
things could maybe or had happened to me somehow. Well, didn't even try to remember because it kind of gets blurry as
mm,
you try to get to the younger stages of yourself.
mhm,
So and I mean, I'm sure there are people that definitely you can see them and you talk to them and you find out immediately almost that some of these stages never happened to them. Or
mhm,
this, I mean, for due to total neglection from their parents or their care, their daycares.
mhm,
Uh, I do not know. And it brings to my mind the I mean, elder adults
mhm,
who lack of wisdom, right?
mhm, mhm,
And so this old dude, and you assume that he's gonna be wise somehow, and you can trust his word, and you talk to them, and they're assholes.
mhm, mhm,
And like this preconceived idea is all of a sudden broken, right? Or maybe you got this teenager, the adolescent, who is disloyal to everything. So he's not even loyal to himself when he's trying to build this idea of loyalty or fidelity somehow during those ages, according to at least what I read. So
mhm,
how does this system of stages actually work?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's a really good question because I think this is a bit again kind of contradictory, like we were talking at the beginning about these ideas that seem opposite but kind of exist hand in hand. So there are 8 stages. They don't always happen. I think that's the first sort of caveat. And if they don't happen, you sort of have the default quote unquote negative situation. Because remember, it's not that is kind of a choice, that's just the default. We are born being ignorant. We are born distrusting. We are born without things. So not having them is kind of the default. The problem is that at the same time, while not all of them need to happen, they do kind of depend on each other. So if I don't have hope that the world can change, it is going to be difficult for me to then build upon that hope my willpower to change the world and sort of decide for myself. Because how could I if the world doesn't answer to me? If I am just a victim of the world? If I cannot trust the world? Um, Same thing with let's say building purpose on that willpower. If I don't have the willpower to say yes, I can change the world, yes, I can make things happen, how can I have the sort of mind space to say, okay, I have a purpose in life, I have something I want to do, if I do not think I can do things to begin with? So they are not necessarily sequential, but they do build up on each other. And it is very difficult to sort of solve the following crisis if you haven't solved the first one. So it's very difficult to get to the next level if you don't have the perk from the previous level. It is possible, it's just really difficult. It's probably sort of end up being hurtful for yourself. Because it is something, there's a reason why Western society sort of values or appreciates or encourages these sort of virtues or these skills. They let you navigate society. They let you sort of enjoy society in many ways. So that's the thing. So they are not mandatory or sequential, but they do build on each other. So in many ways, failure can be cumulative. If you have failure very early in your development, that is likely to sort of have this domino effect where other things along your life will also be really challenging because that fundamental skill is gone there. And again, notice again how, by talking about the past, we're starting to see how it affects the present. There is sort of this trace of continuity between, yeah, I have a very bad caretaker, and things that are happening now in the present. Again, an example I use this. I have trouble trusting my partner. I think they are cheating. I have no evidence. I have no reason to think they are cheating, but I think they are cheating. Why? I don't know. I don't trust people in general. Why? I don't know. Well, maybe we talk about your life when we figure out why. You don't know. But that's kind of the idea there. All of these stages, like I said, at the end, let's say if you ace all of the stages, you get all of the skills, then you get to, I don't know, 65, 70, whatever, as a wise older human that has all of these characteristics of, thinking about the next generation, having trust, having the will to change the world, all of these things. And they are kind of the ideal of that we have on the wise old man. But again, that is an idea of perfection in many ways. So I don't know if there is actually like a perfect human that has aced all of the stages. Mainly because a lot of them don't depend on you; they depend on your social environment.
I mean, it's also Erickson's idea of perfection, to be
Exactly. As well, yes,
more
yes.
precise, right?
Good
And I mean,
observation. Yeah.
this is like this, you're we're a Digimon, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we somehow get into this adaptative outcome, and we get the good evolution. But if we got a maladaptative outcome, we got the bad evolution. So
Mm-hmm,
we couldn't end up turning into school Greymon at any point, and yeah, just because something went wrong on the process, or
mm-hmm,
maybe as you said, it was you're getting into trying to get another perk with a higher challenge level, so it could be maladaptive at the end,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
You somehow achieve it, but it's not as it is supposed to be according to Erickson's canon, but
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
it's there, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. That's a really good observation. Yeah. Again, like this ideal of how people developed is very much the ideal of Erickson's time and sort of context, right? And again, remember he is like a European disciple of Freud, probably well off, right? So there is that idea as well, right? So for him, from his view, this is how humans develop.
Okay, okay. And I mean that gets me a little worried, but I think we're gonna get there in time due to I'm thinking on education now. So, but
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the point when we enter to the in the everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
How is this information applied from
Excellent.
within clinical psychology itself? And what about the other fields such as I mean, education or leadership that somehow seem to be related to this?
Mm-hmm.
And I do think, and I can say that this from this moment, I'm sure a lot of educational theories have been done based on this idea
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
reminds me of a lot of things.
Yes, 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 yes. Yes, that's a good, really good observation. Eric sounds like a lot of sort of peers at his time, sort of I'm going to say were used as the foundation for a lot of other sort of extensions to their ideas of taking education and business. Um, sorry, what was the question? What was the question? I got distracted criticizing capitalism. What was the
Okay, okay.
question before I?
We're into a lot of things now because so how this is applied
Oh,
in everyday life.
okay. Yes, so I think that's a really interesting question because I think in your everyday life, like as an everyday person just existing, I don't think you really have a lot of use for this. I think it would be fun to sort of try to get to know yourself better, to think of your life history under this lens. But I think it would be really optimistic to think that somebody can look at his age stage and say, oh yes, stage number 4, school age, industry versus superiority. That's where I fail. Let me figure out a plan to compensate for my strength. I don't see that happening. Like I don't think that that's a real use of this information. In a clinical setting, um, I think the difference is that you have a problem that you are trying to solve. For the example I've been using all along, I am concerned my partner may be cheating, even if I have no evidence, I have no reason to think what they would be cheating. They love me, like they are caring, they are homebody, like they don't even leave the house. Like I have no reason to think they may be cheating, but I still feel like they may be cheating. But there is a problem here that now we're trying to solve. That's where looking at the world like this may be useful. Because maybe, as we start talking about your life history, at some point you may say, well, yeah, my house, I couldn't really rely on anybody. I had to do everything on my own. Ah, what do you mean? And now we are looking at your child. And now we're thinking about trust in the context of your child. We're thinking about trust in the context of a virtue that is learned, hope, right? So that's where it gains sort of usefulness. When you are trying to solve a specific problem, and you're trying to find the problem in the client's whole life. I need to understand somehow more specifically what's going on with you so I can help you. Well, let me look at it through this lens. I think that's the big difference. I think that's why you don't see a lot of TikToks about Erickson's 8 stages of maturity. Because it's difficult for me to say, okay, so if you have a issue stage number 5, what you need to do is, I don't know, I don't even know what I recommend. Go talk to your friends more. Like, no, like it doesn't work like that.
You know, maybe you haven't seen it in TikToks, but I can assure you, I've seen it on planning processes in school.
Ooh,
I
mm-hmm,
mean, I didn't know it was this because they were talking about stages of learning stages, yeah, and using more or less the same structure so far.
mm-hmm,
So when you are working with small kids, like really small kids from the first grades in school, now mandatory years, like it's entering at 3 years, maybe 4 years tops, and they're talking, okay, they're getting into this stage. And this stage is important because you're gonna get this and this and this, and like everything is like linear and
yes,
similar for every kid.
yes,
And as I've understood so far, that's unreal. I
exactly,
mean,
yes.
each guy is gonna be a little different, right? Or a lot different than according also to their context. Even though inside this whole theory that Derrickson created, context is a really important thing.
Mm-hmm,
And maybe their biology managed to make them mature faster. I don't know. It
mm-hmm,
happens a lot down here in the coast side of Ecuador. You can see, I don't know, 8, 9 year old girls that are looking already like teenagers, and
mm-hmm,
teenagers that look like adults. So if biologically they are like evolving faster, I mean, maybe their minds are not at the same level, but they will try to, I don't know, level up somehow, right?
mm-hmm,
Because they're trying, I don't know, to get the heart of an older guy, because that's very common, right?
mm-hmm,
Or
mm-hmm.
compete with their moms for their good looking. So you see this that kind of things happening down here a
There's even
lot,
like reality
and
shows, I think, where kids and their moms date. I don't know. I thought you the other day. There's this show where kids
sounds like
and moms
MTV
are
stuff.
dating. Like, yeah, it's like what the fuck, yeah, yeah.
Well, in all this. kind of things. I think we already mentioned this somehow, but as ordinary people, what do you think would be a good idea for us to do with this information?
Mhm. I think the most useful part of these as a tool of self-learning, I'd say is looking at the virtues, like I said, again, not in terms of virtue, but in the sense of virtues as skills that you can use. I think in many ways that um, sort of one of the most universal parts. In many ways, uh, acquiring or developing the ability to care about other people and things, for example, in many ways that is, let's say, transcendental to the other life structure. At the end of the day, it's a skill that if you do have, it's going to be good for you and people around you. I think that's kind of the idea here. I think that it can help you identify areas of your life where maybe you need to work on, right? Without them necessarily being like a clinical issue. Maybe you do realize, oh, you know what, I do have trouble finding purpose for myself. I do find trouble like deciding what I want to do or what I don't want to do. I do find trouble finding the motivation to do things. So that's kind of the idea here. Like the same way we have looked at different aspects of the mind before, there's another way to look at them and to try to understand the challenges you as an individual person may be having. Maybe when we talked about motivation in terms of like the locus of control and in terms of like coming from inside and outside, that didn't make sense to you. But maybe now that I'm talking about motivation as a developed skill that you acquire as a child, you're like, oh, you know what? Yeah, yeah, I wasn't allowed to make my own choices when I was a child. Maybe this makes more
Ooh,
sense to
ooh,
you.
ooh.
That's kind of the idea here. These are sort of narratives that are trying to describe similar things inside your mind. So I would say that, like, try to think of it in that way. As I'm on like a checklist of recommended skills to have as a functioning adult. And then you can sort of have this assessment of yourself. Oh, well, do I feel like this is something I can do? Do I feel like I have faith, hope that the world can be better and that I can affect it? Do I feel like if I make a choice, I can follow through it? Like those kind of questions, I think, are kind of what you can get out of these way of viewing yourself, right? Do I have trouble with relationships, loving people? Why? Oh, maybe I did have when I was after in university, I did have a lot of problems having relationships, so I decided I wouldn't have them anymore. Oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, maybe I can do something. But that's the idea. For to be able to sort of reflect on yourself, not as oh I'm missing this, but as oh maybe I could use this. I don't know if that change of posture sort of makes sense. I think that's how we bring Ericsson and his deficiency-based perspective into 2026 as something that you can use to strengthen yourself rather than something wrong with you that you need to fix.
Okay, nice, 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 nice. Get me thinking. Maybe I need to read and write about this at some point, right? Like, did I got this perk in time, or I need to
Mm-hmm,
get it now because
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
maybe I'm gonna need it in the near future. So finally, we're left with the strengths and limitations of this theory, and I think more or less they are quite clear by now. But and then I wrote down some three of each side so I can get more or less an idea. But you tell me if maybe we need some more or there are things that could be a little more important. So for example, as a straits, there is this lifelong perspective. Like maybe that's a strong point because okay, it can be a guide to what's the beginning, where's the end, so like a track to follow, right?
mm-hmm,
Um, and there's also this idea of which integrates the social, emotional, and the identity dimensions. So that's kind of a straight. It's integrating stuff that you normally are taking apart or taking like different things. And The last thing that was annotated is like it is clinically intuitive and narratively accessible because
Mm.
I mean in these terms, and as you said, maybe we can analyze it like, oh, okay, this happened when I was like, I mean, 8 or 9, and I can notice I never was able to actually do this. So maybe I do have something blocking me from developing furthermore. So I need to work around this idea. Uh, and its limitations maybe on the other hand, like they wrote something like stem from limited empirical
Mm.
falsibility.
Mhm.
I don't really understand that completely, but I mean, it's something like it's quite simple to give false positive results. Yeah, more or
Uh,
less like that. Like,
no, the idea is that, and this is a flaw that all of psychoanalysis, and I say a lot of psychology have. Erickson is proposing his theory based on the people he has worked with and seen. It is difficult to replicate that in a different context. That's what it means that it's not
yeah, yeah, yeah.
falsifiable. So I cannot verify or that is true or not because I cannot reproduce the same condition because I don't have the same people, the same knowledge, the same experience. And that
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the
yeah,
problem. That
yeah,
is
yeah, got it.
definitely
So
one of the critiques that, like I said, psychoanalysis, and I'd say all of psychology may ways have, is difficult to falsify.
yeah, yeah, like it's like poor scientific methods
Yes.
because you
Yeah,
can
yes.
have exactly the same results, right? So
Yeah.
the fact that stage boundaries are approximate, and it's another kind of limitation because uh, and as we said with the other thing, you can't actually say or repeat the stuff if boundaries are not well defined. So there's no way to replicate this idea. Maybe it's 8 and 3 months, and all of a sudden the stage doesn't work anymore. But he says between 8 and 9, so it's in the range, but not working in this kid or whatever. And
Mm-mm.
finally, we got neurodivergent individuals or those with no normative life
Mm.
trajectories fall outside the spectrum.
Yeah.
So that's some terrible for nowadays because there's a lot of evidence of how neurodivergency is actually growing in the last years. So kind of a big flaw here. It's a problematic thing that maybe needed to update by somebody
Absolutely.
that is prepared.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's definitely another one of the challenges, especially when we're talking about like theories like Ericsson, that's like 100 years old. He's not only looking at his own perspective of an ideal human being, he's also limited in what he could see at the time. Like if you told Ericsson, hey dude, like you have to take neurodivergent individual into account, he'd be like, what? So again, important thing to keep in mind the culture where this is happening. And I think yeah, absolutely this is another one of the limitations. A lot of humans, maybe more than 50%, would probably feel identified with this path. But there is definitely a lot of people for whom this process wouldn't make sense. We were talking about the biology earlier, right? Because the biology is different. So it makes sense for it to happen in a different way. I don't know if this kind of communicates the idea there.
Yeah, sort of. So what about these traits and the I don't know the limitations that this theory have? Um, is there anything else that you may like to add your deep thoughts on it? Like, is there anything else that you will add as a trait, maybe, or maybe there's another kind of a strong limitation that you can notice from it?
Mm, I mean, I did have some notes here about the bias of gender, but I already mentioned the one I thought was interesting. That Erickson's framework in many ways reflects what I say still is in many ways a male sort of development. The
Mm-hmm.
example I have here, for example, is that in his sequence, identity precedes intimacy, This is very much true or fits a male or a male kind of development curve. But with female in what society expects females to do, these two go hand in hand, intimacy and identity develop at the same time. So this is kind of the one of the things I had here, but I already said that in interval. Again, this is very much the product of his time, right? Like, this is 100 years ago.
The way studies were conducted, anyway. So
another interesting note I have here that could be a strength that in many ways sort of I thought it was interesting is that it is Erickson who coins the term identity crisis, and we just talked about what they are. It's not a crisis in the sense of me the plane crashing. It is a crisis in terms of a crossroads, a turning point. This is sort of where the term "I'm having an identity crisis" comes from. And there is something in your identity that is not yet fully complete. Then there still needs to be resolved in many ways. But I think that's it. I didn't really have any other notes on sort of these strengths or weaknesses. I think it's very useful, but I also think it's important to sort of contextualize it and look at it as part of a greater understanding of the mind and not as the understanding of the mind, which I think a lot of people tend to do with, not just with Erickson, but with a lot of psychology.
Well, and also that it's important to remember that first of all, it's not a linear stuff, and secondly, you may or may not step on every step. Right? So, since that's the case, why don't we get into the frequently asked questions part of this session? So, we were trying to refocus these questions this time, try to make them like more, I don't know, user friendly. Let's use it like that. So, what happens at each stage of Ericsson development, and what does a person gain or lose from it?
Okay, so there are 8 stages, like I said. You don't really lose anything. Again, that's kind of the clarification I made earlier. It's not that it is a gamble where you either win or lose. The base state is not having the ability. That's just the condition where we start. So it's not that you fail, you just don't do it, if that makes sense. So there is no agency that leads to failure. Not doing anything is the failure. Not going through the process is the failure. Does that make sense? So you don't really lose anything, you just gain stuff. So it is something that you do to get something, not something that
Even
you
if you,
risk something.
I mean, even if you gain something that is bad.
In theory, you already have what is bad. Like, if you don't have
Not
trust,
knowing.
exactly. If you don't have knowledge, you have ignorance. But it's not like you gain ignorance. Ignorance is just the absence of knowledge. That's kind of the idea here as well. It's not that you gain mistrust. Mistrust is just the absence of trust.
Oh yeah, I'm getting you. Yeah.
Yeah, like,
So
like there is no
you
doubt.
enter the stage with the possibility of earning something, but if you don't, you stay in blank, right?
Exactly.
Like that never happened.
Exactly. Like, okay, darkness isn't a thing. Darkness is just the absence of light.
Absence of light.
This is the same.
Yeah.
This
this is physics. Don't worry.
Yes,
if you fail, nothing will happen. There's a chance for you to earn the perk. So maybe fight the dragon, right?
Exactly. Like, I couldn't say I failed at learning quantum physics because I have never tried to learn quantum physics. That's kind of the issue. Yeah. So, like I said, so there are.
No, go ahead. Finish.
So I was gonna say there are 8. I mean, it is difficult to summarize them. Let me see if these. Yeah, I think the easiest way to think about them, like that is not a table like I have here, is in terms of just thinking of the virtues. So as an infant, you are trying to develop hope. As an early child, you are trying to develop your willpower, your ability to make choices and stick to them. When you are around the age of play, so when you are like in early school, you are trying to learn that to do things on your own without depending on others, on your own without feeling bad for doing things for yourself. As you get into like proper school age, like think middle school, you are trying to get an idea of how good you are in relation to other people. I am the one that is good at math. They are the ones that are good at physics. I am the one that's good in physical education. They are the ones that are good at social science. During adolescence, in this epoch of confusion, you are trying to gain, I think they put it as fidelity. And that is the ability to stick with the things that you believe in or that you have chosen. So if I decide that I am going to be emo, I'm going to stick with being emo till I die.
Not the stage mom.
Exactly, it's gonna stay, mom. Like, exactly. So that's fidelity. If I'm being loyal to my beliefs. Um, in many ways, it also this element in adolescence also includes fidelity to the law and your relationship to following the law, to sticking to authority, for example. Um, then you have in your young adulthood, you have love and the ability to still care about somebody regardless of their flaws. I think that's how Erickson sort of frames love as sort of leaving behind this childish idea of I love you because you are perfect, and moving into the adult idea of I love you despite your not being perfect. So that's kind of the balance that young adulthood sort of brings. Then you have sort of just general adulthood or like standard adulthood when it is about sort of creating things. So up until this point, you have been growing, you have been taken care of. At this point, you realizing that you can create things, that the things that you make will remain there for future generations, even if you yourself, you're the speaker, are no longer around. This is sort of understanding, for example, the value of museums, the value of the study of history, sort of this idea of in this starts, I guess, the idea of wisdom of connecting to everything else, right? Of seeing yourself not as me, Josh, but me, Josh, the human part of humanity. And finally, you have old age wisdom, where the idea is to sort of, where like the idea here is to sort of detach from. I mean, this one's really Buddhist, but like to detach for that cycle that you just went through, to get to the end of the cycle and sort of be at peace with that end, to make peace with the fact that it is going to be over sooner or later, and now you're just kind of hanging out until until it's time to go. And that's kind of the idea there, and it will be also the synthesis of all the other abilities, right? Now, this is the wayful mind that you were talking about earlier, right? And the one that is cares for other, that shares knowledge, that is wise, that is there, that is part of the community. That is kind of the idea here. Yeah, and that would be the eighth stage.
Okay. Second question says, can unsolved conflicts from early stages affect someone later in life? And how does that show up?
Yes, absolutely. So there is an expectation, like a social expectation, that you will be a functional person. If you are not, you will get locked up, right? If you are not a functional person, you either get locked up in a mental health institution or you are going to end up in jail. So there is this expectation of you having some basic functional skills that let you be part of society. The thing is that there is also an appreciation for skills that may be not necessary. Mm, People will like appreciate somebody who is loyal to their conviction. People will appreciate somebody who takes care of other people and have that sort of stewardship stripe to them. I say all of this to say that it is not that Because, like I said, it's not a matter of failing. Because the default state is failure if you look at it like that. And I don't think that makes a lot of sense. It is a matter of having or not having the developed skill. And I think that can cause you problems. Because society expects you to have the skills. So society expects you to be able to go to the bank, talk about your bank account, and do the math, and have a cordial conversation with the cashier. If you start yelling and throwing stuff around, you are going to get dragged out of the bank. So that's the idea here. It's not that not having these skills causes you trouble, or that it is a trouble by itself. It is that society expects you to have these skills, so not having them is a problem when you are trying to be a part of a functioning society. I don't know if this makes sense. And that will probably make you miserable. I don't know if this makes sense.
Okay. Okay, I'm reshaping this question because I think we already answered what are the virtues in Erickson's theory, but I think more important is how they actually shape the person or the identity over time.
Yeah, no question. Okay. So like I said, so the virtues are for Erickson the sort of skill or these fundamental abilities that you develop as you go through these different stages in your life. It doesn't have that moralistic good or bad. It's not like the seven category virtue. I would say they are directly connected to somebody's personality because they tend to become a stable trait of your personality. So if you're somebody who has learned that they can affect the world with the things they do and they have this willpower, so that's stage number three, I think. Odds are that is something that will be sort of determine the way you see the world. The world will seem more malleable to you because you have come to learn that you can change the world. That will effectively make you act differently than in the opposite case. If you think the world is not malleable, that there is no chance that things could be better or different, you will approach the world in a different way than the other person. So, like I said, so the way this is created is that how these crises get resolved usually will sort of determine or contribute to different stable personality traits in the person. So that kind of dark reaction. In many ways, because these are ways to see the world and to understand the world, they will also condition the way you relate to the world. I don't know if this.
Okay, this thing about identity is like common in the questions, but let's see. Uh, so I got this one. It says, how does identity development depend on relationships, culture, and social expectations?
Hmm. Okay, so identity, let's understand it as the way you yourself or your environment defines who you are. So the way you understand yourself to be, what you understand yourself to be, and how you choose to present that, that is your identity. I would say these elements like relationship, culture, and social expectation, and I would argue the learnings that we have been talking about today, they operate in a deeper layer. I mean, talking today in a deeper layer than part of the first element. You would normally not think of, I mean, you would normally not say things like, oh, I am a psychologist because I grew up in a society that values sacrificing women, and I grew up in a household that was all women, so I learned. I do not give that explanation. Instead, the thing that I have learned and the way I see the world sort of make me gravitate towards being a psychologist. towards liking listening to people, towards liking taking care of people, towards liking all these things I like and enjoy or whatever. This is more something that I follow and less something that I necessarily see or rationally identify. That's what I mean here as well. So when we talk about somebody's identity and what they can say and sort of explain about themselves, part of what they can say is sort of limited or conditioned or built on these underlying, I would say, unconscious ideas. So they are directly connected, but not necessarily the same, if that makes sense. So your identity does depend on your learnings, on your environment, on your relationships, but those are not your identity. Your identity sort of comes up from all of those things.
Mm, yeah. So it's build up like materials at the end,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah. I like the metaphor of like a seed and the soil. So the content, social environment, culture, relationships, that's the soil. And then you are the seed. So yes, I guess they are part of what you are. Yes, they define what you are, but at the same time they are not you. And you have a lot of other possibilities.
Yeah. Nice. Hmm. And this is the last one. It says, can we talk about this? But let's see how you frame it at the end. So, can Erickson's stage apply to people with nonlinear life paths, including neurodivergent or disabled individuals?
Mm. Not as stages. I think by definition, the idea of a sequential series of stages would be out of the window if we're talking about a nonlinear development. I would say most developments are nonlinear, but topic for different courses. Um, what I do think would still be useful is what I said earlier, thinking of it in terms of different learnings that ideally, if you acquire, you will do better in society. So regardless of your what kind of disability you have, what kind of neurodivergence you have, being able to realize that you can affect the world and change it is probably a good thing for you. So the difference would be that maybe instead of this being something that you learn as you are an infant in school, maybe you learn this as an adult with a social worker that is trying to help you realize and empower yourself. That would be the difference.
Okay, nice. I think that's how the main course of today is served. Now, well, as every week, I'd like to remind you that we're always in this open stage of being willing to hear whatever you got to say. There on the other side on the screen. Um, as you see, we're making some adjustments and changes um, as we go on working. So uh, things are still happening. We got some issues we need to work on from last episode. Yet, so stay tuned for whatever's gonna come for next week too.
Yeah, but always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to us. I hope some of what we have said today is useful for you. And always, if you have questions, we'll be happy to answer. And yeah, and if you need professional help, you can reach out to us at the Healer Field. Um, in the way we show you what we do with this part of conversation, we show you where we're coming from and why we do the things we do. And so if this makes sense to you, if you think we are the right people to help you solve your issues, yeah, give us a call. We'll be happy to help
Put an ear on your shoulder or your
you.
mouth. Well,
Mhm.
more or less. So
Mhm.
in the end, growing up seems to be a matter of renegotiating who we are in relation to others, rather than pretending to have everything figured out from the start, because it doesn't happen. Life is, to some extent, the meaning we give to it. So
Mhm.
I think that's
Yeah,
it for today.
yeah, yeah. That's it for today. Thank you again for being here as always. Yeah, I hopefully hopefully some of the things we talked about today are useful to you in building your own idea of who you are and what kind of help or support you need. So yeah, hopefully this is useful for you.
Yeah. May they stay with you. Until next time.
All right,
Peace
next
out.
time. Bye bye.
Bye.